Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Alphabetical Fugazi, the only podcast that devotes an episode each to discussing every song in the Fugazi catalog, from Fuga A to Fuga Z. I'm your host, Ian James Wright, and joining me today to discuss Cassavetes from the 1993 album In on the Kill Taker is Jared Coffin, administrator of the Facebook group called This Is Not a Fugazi Appreciation Society. Jared, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for being here. I appreciate you and the other administrators working on that Facebook group because basically before I started this podcast, I had a couple of unresolved questions, like undecided things that I was wondering about. So that was a good place for me to go and ask Fugazi fans like how I should proceed with things. So that's been helpful. And aside from that, it's just a fun place to go to see little oddities people are posting, cool pictures and interviews and videos and whatnot. So it's fun. Thanks for your work there.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's going on 5 years, I think, in August, and I was asked to do it by somebody. His name was Jeremy Zarins. He asked me to jump in because of my knowledge. And recently, I picked up Sam Noble, who's also he's become a pretty good friend from England, and he helps me out with the administrative stuff. But it's totally democracy. We try to keep it that way, and we try to keep it real cool with the fans. Very little problems there, and we all seem to get along really great. It's a great thing.
Yeah, well, people with knowledge, that's exactly who I need on this show. So it's good to have you here. Do you want to tell me a little about your relationship with Fugazi? When did you first get into them, and how did that proceed, and how have you related to them through the years?
Well, it's a couple things actually happened, and it gets a little weird. How I actually really acknowledged the band. First, my sister was looking at colleges in 1990, and she looked at James Madison University in Virginia. She had a recital to get a scholarship there, and we went down. And the guy walking around the campus said to me, "I had my Walkman. I was only in sixth grade at the time, and I had my Walkman." And he's like, "What are you listening to, buddy?" And I'm like, Belle Biv DeVoe. And he
nice
Poison, that song. And he's like, "Oh man." And I'm like, "Why? Well, what's good?" And he's like, "Well, this band called Fugazi was just here a couple weeks ago, if not a week ago." I can't remember his exact words, but recently I've been able to look back at that show, and it's exactly the same clothes. Everything was the same as how I remember hearing about him, but it didn't click. Fugazi did not click for me. Then in about eighth grade, I was sitting in a doctor's office waiting room, and he had NPR on. Yeah, a waiting room. Yeah. And he had NPR on, and they started talking about Fugazi and how the integrity of the band and everything like that. And I was blown away by the $5 shows. Of course, I was a kid at the time, so the all-age shows was really a great idea. And just the humility that I got across from this program. So I sat on it for a couple of years, or like about a year, and I bought a Margin Walker, and I loved Promises. That really stuck out, but I hadn't heard Waiting Room or anything like that. And then actually a friend gave me his In on the Kill Taker, and it sat on my bookshelf for a year. His name is Matt Davis, and he's probably listening to it right now, or to this podcast eventually. So I wanted to drop that because he gave me the tape, and it just sat there. And then I walked around because I didn't have any mode of transportation. I put it in my Walkman and just listened to it, and it grew on me. And then I became obsessed. And that I'm not obsessed now because I'm an adult and everything. But as a teenager, oh boy, I was. And when Red Medicine came out, my middle name is Madison, believe it or not. So when Red Medicine came out, my name is Jared Madison. And I thought that they had written it about me. I thought that they had written the whole album about me. So I eventually talked to Guy, and I asked him, "What's this about?" And he's like, "Well, it's about cough medicine." Well, my last name is Coffin. So, it's about cough medicine. And what he said to me made sense. He's like, at first, when you taste it, it doesn't go down so smooth. But then when when you're all done with it, it makes you feel better. That's what he said to me. So that really stuck out with me, and I was able to tell Ian that, and I guess he got a kick out of it. That that young mind that you have. So that's my introduction to Fugazi in my life.
That's great. Well, it's too bad it didn't turn out to be about you, but I mean, good album anyway, right?
Oh, it didn't.
That reminds me of. You just reminded me of. I saw this clip somewhere where some young fan had gone to John Lennon's house, back when he was alive, and this fan was like obsessed with John Lennon and thought he was writing songs about him. And like John Lennon actually came out and talked to him. He was like, well, how could I be writing songs about you? I don't even know you. Stuff like that. So unfortunately his story didn't turn out too well in the end with obsessed fans, but I'm sure you are a safe guy and you're not going to do anything crazy.
Yeah. Well, the fact that I could tell that to Ian, right? I actually said to him, this is what I thought, and I think it's so funny now, and he got a kick out of it. So
yeah, today we're talking about Cassavetes. Really big song when it comes to how I think of the band. I mean, the first thing I should say about it is that obviously people who've been listening to this show are aware that I use it for my clips from it for my intro and outro music. And it's funny, I didn't even really think about it very hard. I mean, I think it is a song that encapsulates who Fugazi is in many ways, but that didn't really enter it into it for me. It just sort of came to me like the sonic qualities of it was like, I think that would sound great to start and finish a show. There's just something about it, and so I hardly gave it a second thought. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to use little clips from Cassavetes. In preparation for talking about this, I had previously watched, maybe a few years ago, The Killing of a Chinese Bookie, but I had never seen anything else that Cassavetes had directed. This past week, I did go ahead and watch A Woman Under the Influence and Opening Night. So that's the homework I did to be ready to talk about Cassavetes. How about you? Do you have any introductory remarks for talking about this song?
I too had never watched any Cassavetes films. He's a man of a lot of influence, and as we get into a little bit of the story about Cassavetes, it's amazing. Another thing is the first line of the song is not about Cassavetes. It's not from Cassavetes. Anything Cassavetes did. It's from a guy named Juzo Itami. He was a director, and he directed this movie called Tampopo in 1985, which is a comedy about food. It's a Japanese, or I believe it's Japanese. It might be Chinese. I'm not sure. But the weird thing about Itami was he killed himself by jumping off a building in 1997, and he had done movies about the Yakuza, which is the triads and everything. Apparently, they didn't like it so much. He had been accosted, and it actually made the government go after the Yakuza and cut down on them, on the size and everything, because they had assaulted him after his movies.
Wow.
So they're saying, there's speculation, nobody knows, that it was foul play, that he actually did not jump off the building. So that's just interesting. And that was well after the song was written.
Yeah.
But this is my last picture, is actually from Juzo Itami's Tampopo.
Yeah,
so I thought that was really interesting.
That little tidbit about that line being from Tampopo, that's something that was mentioned in the 33 1/3 book by friend of the podcast, Joe Gross. Another little tidbit from that book that I thought was interesting is, Guy was explaining that his first job, let me just quote here, he said, "My first job, post-paper route, was as a movie usher in a suit and bow tie, first at the KB Cinema and later at a repertory house called the Georgetown Theater. That job was passed down to me from Henry Rollins and Ian MacKaye, who established the punk rocker Beachhead at that job." So yeah, basically both Ian and Guy as young kids worked at movie theaters. So the movies are sort of in the DNA of this band in that way.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's see. So you watched A Woman Under the Influence?
I did watch it. I did pause it in the middle because it's almost 2.5 hours long.
Right.
It's good. The way that Cassavetes films. I did some reading about his documentaries and stuff like that, or a documentary about him. And while his film guy or his cameraman would be filming, he would walk over and he would bump him with his elbow, and it would cause the camera to jump. And he'd be like, "That's what I'm looking for while you're filming. I want it to shake." And he goes in for these close-ups that are they're unconstitutionally uncomfortable, I'd have to say.
Yeah.
The movie is so raw that it's almost like you're waiting for something bad to happen the whole time. Almost like that new TV show Shameless. You're always just waiting for something to happen that's going to be like. But with Cassavetes, it doesn't always quite happen, but then it does. It makes you uncomfortable. So I understand the heart is beating like a riot.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that crush my calm. I think that's so perfect. And I couldn't imagine seeing this movie in the early 80s or something like that in the theater. I don't know if I would do it. I don't know, but it was definitely an interesting watch. And
it's so interesting when a filmmaker can create that much tension and like raise your pulse without action scenes, car chases, shootouts, whatever, but just by the like human drama they create. And I think you're right. The camera work in Cassavetes' films definitely adds to that. I was watching these movies thinking this guy is like the anti I don't know, David Fincher or whatever, like somebody like that who a lot of the time in the movies of a director like that, you almost don't notice that a camera is there. It's framing a shot in a way where you can sort of see everything. It's giving you all the information you want. But in Cassavetes, the camera is so active and it's doing so much. It's taking you to places where you don't necessarily want to go, showing you things that you don't want to see, getting too close for comfort. And so you just notice the camera more as almost a character.
Yeah, you can hear the actors breathing. The mistakes. I'm not even sure if they're mistakes or if they're supposed to be that way. When they stutter, stuff like that. I'm not sure if it's supposed to be. I noticed in an early scene, Jenna Rollins' mother is pulling out, and the car stalls, and she starts it again, and then she just drives off. I wonder if that was supposed to be that way, or if it was just the way it was, and they went from the beginning to the end nonstop.
Yeah, absolutely. This is, of course, ties into when Guy says in the song, shot in real realism. Like, yeah, absolutely. I was thinking that in the film Opening Night. So one thing about Cassavetes I noticed, the realism extends to the smallest things like that. There was this one shot that I noticed where the Jenna Rollins character pulls up in a car. And in this film, she's a celebrity, basically. She's a very famous Broadway actress. But the car pulls up, and it's nighttime. There's light shining down, and the window of the car is all like smudged with fingerprints and stuff. And I just feel like your average director of a mainstream Hollywood movie would just want that totally cleaned up. So there's no camera glare, there's no weirdness, there's no schmutz on the window or anything like that. But Cassavetes just lets it be.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
I wonder if he goes as far as like smearing his hands all over it, so there would be some extra realism. I have no idea, but it makes you wonder that.
He doesn't seem like the type. He does not seem like the type that would do that. He wasn't like a ladies' man, but he was like a Frank Sinatra type guy, like just very like a good dresser and stuff like that. He's a hilarious guy. For that time, of course. But he had a good sense of humor. If you ever get a chance to watch a Dick Cavett show with him, that him and Peter Falk. I guess Peter Falk was a really good friend of his. Columbo.
That was one of the most distracting things of the film I just referred to, Opening Night, which doesn't star Peter Falk at all, but he does show up like right at the end of the movie, just as somebody who's in the audience of the play that's happening. It's so distracting. Like it's a very weird choice, but you're just like, wait, was that Peter Falk? And he doesn't do anything. He doesn't have any lines. He's just sort of there, and you're like, what?
Well, I never knew, and I don't know much about Peter Falk, but I know he has that eye, the eye that goes off when he stares. I don't know if it's a glass eye or what it was.
Yeah, that's a glass eye.
It is a glass eye. Well, it's very obvious in this movie several times.
Yeah,
in a woman under the influence.
If you've never watched Columbo, Columbo's really fun to watch. I recommend it. In one of the Columbo's all like sort of mini movies. They're like 1.5 hour long TV episode movies. Yeah. I think in one of them, Cassavetes plays the villain. So that's interesting. I don't remember if I've seen that one. But yeah, love Peter Falk in that.
The other thing to remember about Cassavetes is he was a beginning actor. I mean, he acted in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, which is that ties into an important part of the story. That's how he made his money, which he then in turn used to finance his independent films, which is, I think it's fair to say, the point of this song. The independence of Cassavetes from the film industry and how that really ties into what Fugazi were doing with their music and their records.
I think you're exactly right. That is the point of this song to me. That's one of the reasons I picked this song, is because it's so poignant, and there's not really much you can go around other than saying what it is. Cassavetes does have an award, a Spirit Award named after him. And it's as long as you have a budget of $500,000 or less, you're eligible for this award. So, I mean, it's a big deal. He still holds his part in what Hollywood is today. But I think a lot of directors and people like that appreciate him. Everyday Joes don't know much about him unless you lived during the time. I know Martin Scorsese's a huge fan of his.
Yeah. Let me quote again from Joe Gross's 33 1/3 book. Guy says, people always talk about the sacrifices involved in doing things the way he did them, Cassavetes, and by extension the way we did them, while ignoring the opportunities and the creative license and the freedoms that are gained. To my mind, the sacrifices seem negligible when you see the payoff in his work. So that's really interesting. I was thinking about that, where, if Cassavetes, if these films had been financed by a major studio, there's no way they would have turned out the way they are, and the choices that Cassavetes made, which in turn made me think about Fugazi. Like, what if Fugazi had been on a major label? How would their music have been different? It's almost unimaginable. Like it's impossible to think they would have made the same records they ended up making. Really.
Well, that's a big issue when we talk about if there's ever going to be a reunion, what it's going to be like. And personally, I'm happy with what Fugazi's done. I really am. I am dreading having to pay $500 for a ticket that sold for $5.
Yeah, I doubt that would happen.
Yeah, or not even getting one at that. That would ruin my decade if I wasn't able to attend something like that. So, but yeah, I hear what you mean about the whole DIY thing, and I think that it when I saw, I was able to go up and see and meet Guy at the 20th anniversary of Instrument in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And he and Jem Cohen both mentioned Cassavetes several times. And this is like 20, 30 years after the song and everything. So it's still a big part of the way they think about film. And of course they were mentioning it about Instrument, but I think a lot of the close-ups in Instrument and stuff like that might have been inspired by the way Cassavetes does it.
Yeah, and I think just relatively recently, so Cassavetes never won an Oscar in his lifetime, but I guess Jenna Rollins finally did. She had sort of I guess one of those career retrospective kind of Oscars. Where, they just award her for her entire career, basically. An
honorary Oscar, yeah.
Yeah, I think that was in 2015.
2015. Actually, in 1975, she was nominated for the movie we were talking about, A Woman Under the Influence. But Ellen Burstyn beat her in that for the Oscar. It turns out Hollywood did not nominate her because of John.
Oh, really?
I've heard that several times from her own mouth. That they came to her and told her she deserved this years ago, but it was because of Cassavetes that she did not get it. Well, so that's really interesting to me.
I don't think I saw whatever movie it was with Ellen Burstyn, but man, in A Woman Under the Influence, Jenna Rollins is absolutely incredible. Like, I've never seen a performance like that before by an actress.
You know who she really reminded me of, and I kept on saying it. There's she's in the movie, the show Community. Her name is Jillian Jacobs. Do you know who she is?
Oh, yeah.
She really reminds me of her a lot. I don't know how or why.
That's interesting. I could see her as kind of a Jenna Rollins type. Yeah, sure. So Jenna Rollins, she was a beautiful woman, and in his movies, like in A Woman Under the Influence and Opening Night, so the camera loves her like in its own way, but it's definitely a different way from the way that mainstream films shoot their beautiful, glamorous actresses. It's like Cassavetes uses sort of unflattering camera angles, like shooting her from sort of below at times. So you can see like the sort of like the fat under her chin, for example. extreme close-ups and like harsh lighting so you can see the small wrinkles in her face and like the fine hairs on her upper lip, just little unflattering things like that it's like it shows how beautiful she is, but also just the reality of what a beautiful woman actually looks like. So it's just so different from your typical film to watch in that way.
You're right. She is the star. Definitely, there's no doubt about it, and she is very beautiful. But in the whole movies that I've seen, all the people are so realistic. They remind me of your uncle at a family reunion, stuff like that. And it's not like these beautiful Hollywood people that we see today, where it's all been polished and everything. It's the way that I would like to see our film industry become again, in that sense, where the actors are just people. I thought that was really neat about that movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Your standard director, if he has a beautiful actress, he wants her to look like 100% hot 100% of the time. Every shot is going to be centered around her looking absolutely beautiful. But Cassavetes is more interested in realism. So that's pretty cool. I think that, since we're talking about Gena Rowlands and simply how she looks at the moment, it's interesting to bring up the Le Tigre song about Cassavetes, right? Oh,
yeah.
So
it's called... I don't know much about it. I appreciate Bikini Kill and stuff like that. I don't listen to them so much, but I do know that Kathleen Hanna is in Le Tigre, correct?
Right.
Or was in it. And I did listen to the song, and it's called What's Your Take on Cassavetes? And she says, misogynist genius, alcoholic messiah. Well, he was definitely an alcoholic because he died of cirrhosis of the liver.
Yeah, no question about that.
I would say that if you die of cirrhosis and continue to drink after you're told that that's going on, you might have a problem. We're not going to get into that today, but genius, I don't doubt his genius. I don't doubt that one bit. Misogynist, definitely the acting. There's definitely a lot of misogyny in those movies.
Yeah, that is probably the main discussion point of that song. And so to be fair, from what I read, I think it's the film called Husbands where that has like prompted criticisms of misogyny. I don't know. In the movies that I saw, misogyny is definitely portrayed in the film, but I think it's very hard to make the argument that in the movies I saw, at least, that it's portrayed positively. I mean, watching Peter Falk in A Woman Under the Influence, like, I love that guy. I think he's such a great actor, but I hated him in that movie. He's so terrible. His treatment of his wife, I don't think it's portrayed in any positive way at all. So it's hard to read that as a misogynist film to me. If anything, I would say it seems like a feminist film. It's like a real sympathetic and insightful exploration of a female character who is also just realistically drawn. It sort of gets inside what makes her tick, her frustrations, the things about domestic life that are sort of driving her to, quote unquote madness, and whether she actually is crazy is definitely debatable. But yeah, I guess I have to watch more Cassavetes to be convinced that he's misogynist in any way.
Peter Falk in that movie, I have pity for him. I totally understand. Other than his abuse, his physical and mental abuse, I see him as a caring person. He just has no idea on how to handle it.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right. It's not the sort of, if anyone is the villain in that movie, it's him. But I don't think it's fair to call him a villain. Because I think you're right. I think Cassavetes is portraying everybody as somebody who acts the way they act because, like, for reasons. It's clear that he doesn't know what he's doing. He doesn't know how to give his wife the like what she needs, basically, which is for him not to flip out. He's so touchy and so sensitive. He's so concerned about what other people will think about what she does that he ends up blowing up at her, and it's just this constant powder keg that's waiting to be set off between them. They seem, in some ways, they're so wrong for each other, and yet they do. I think it's clear they do love each other in whatever broken way they do love each other.
Well, it's funny because when she's not acting too bad, he yells at her, and when she's acting crazy, he's there and he's caring and trying to do stuff. I think personally, if anybody deserved an Oscar, it's those kids in that movie, because at first I need to warn anybody that hasn't seen Cassavetes movies that this movie is tough. There's some parts in it that would not fly today at all, like giving alcohol to a 5-year-old. There's just some parts, so you got to be ready for it. But I've never seen anything as real as his films.
So that reminds me of something, bringing up the kids, that I was going to say, which is sometimes the tension of these films reminds me of Fugazi, especially Ian, of course, being confrontational with the audience. Because, whenever you were at a Fugazi show and like Ian would harangue somebody, it would create this moment of sort of awkward tension, and you were uncomfortable in the moment, but that was sort of a part of it in an interesting way that maybe I didn't appreciate until watching these films. I think to a certain extent maybe Ian enjoyed just doing that. I don't think he cared as much as people maybe thought that he did. I don't think he was really pissed off. I think he just sort of enjoyed playing that part and creating these moments of tension. And I think that relates to these films that I watched for me, because audience in each of the movies is like Cassavetes uses that as a serious means of creating tension. So in opening night, the whole drama is based around the fact that there will be a live audience. They're like rehearsing for this play and it's going really badly. The whole thing could turn out to be a fiasco. That's where the stakes of the whole thing come from, is that there's an audience who's going to see it. And in A Woman Under the Influence, it's like, obviously, the husband and wife character and the arguments between them are bad, but it's really the fact that this couple has children that makes their relationship so horrifying. So we have to watch these poor kids witness their parents' behavior. And that's really what makes it, I mean, both thrilling and terrifying. And actually, come to think of it, in opening night, the play within the movie also has a scene where kids of a similar age are watching the adults have a screaming, violent fight. So it's like, it's all tied in this interesting way of Cassavetes and Fugazi, like just using the fact that an audience is there to up the stakes, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, when all the shows I was at, I've seen several people asked to leave and given their money back. It seemed like the Fugazi fans were all just where you were explaining, a little uncomfortable, but at the same time we understood it. We had seen it before. We understood it. But there was also that quarter of the room or whatever it might have been that were just coming to say they saw Fugazi while they were in town. And they weren't always so nice about the whole thing. And I always had mad respect for Fugazi. In fact, sometimes it could be that they could do no wrong. But it's not that way anymore as an adult. I grew up in the early 80s, so I had seen behavior. It was just on its way out, and I'm middle class growing up, which is a lot of the whole thing here. These are middle class families acting this way. It's not lower class. It's not upper class where they get away with anything. It's families that we would have been in. A lot of people, the majority of America would have been in it, from what I know. It touches a part of me. While my family was not like that, my parents had adopted 4 kids. My parents were into service. They were great people. My dad actually chauffeured around Martin Luther King Jr. when he worked in Boston. Whoa. Which is pretty amazing. I mean, it's pretty awesome stuff. And then he was an inner school teacher in Cleveland during the riots. He helped start the Head Start program with the government and stuff like that. He was in that group. He wasn't one of the names, but he was in that. So my family was always into service and stuff like that. So I was on the outskirts, but I've seen it with family and stuff like that. I've seen that kind of behavior. And
yeah, I think even if you had a good upbringing with good parents, everybody has those moments, especially I think if you have siblings. They're always going to be a couple of those blow-ups, like really terrible family fights that you can relate to a film like A Woman Under the Influence, even if it never got that bad or abusive. It's just a feeling that I think is very common to people.
Absolutely. I related to it right away. I mean, I think it's long, and there are scenes where, you know, the car is driving over the hill, and then he captures it over the hill, driving over another hill, where it seems like it's 20 seconds too long. But at the same time, since it's shot at that time, you can just admire the cars, you can admire the streetlights, you can admire everything that's totally different from the way it is today. And I really appreciate that about his films.
That is true. Yeah, I noticed, in A Woman Under the Influence, the beer that he's drinking and letting his kids have a taste of, I didn't even recognize that brand of beer. So yeah, it's like a bygone era in some ways. That's interesting to see.
Yeah.
To bring up a couple of other points about the lyrics of this song that I think are just that piqued my interest a little bit. I think the line, "Hollywood, are you waiting on a sign?" That's sort of a clever little maybe joke about the Hollywood sign. Like, there's Hollywood has this gigantic sign saying its own name, but it's a city that needs a sign also, some signposts to point it in the right direction. I thought the line sad-eyed mogul reaching for your wallet. Recently I recorded an episode of the show where I sort of discovered that I think Guy is like a really big Bob Dylan guy in some understated ways. So I'm wondering if that sad-eyed adjective is a little reference to Sad-Eyed Lady of the Lowlands by Bob Dylan. Huh. There are a couple of little things like that jumped out to me in the lyrics.
I think that sign analogy is really interesting. That sign actually used to say Hollywood Land. It wasn't just Hollywood.
Is that right?
And they cut the rest of it off. It cost them like $29,000 to build that sign.
I remember. Did you ever see the movie The Rocketeer? I think there's like there's a joke about that in that movie that's how the Hollywood Land sign changed into Hollywood, but I kind of thought that was just a joke for the movie.
No, yeah, it was actually. Remember, Hollywood was like America's first development, from what I've heard in reading history. Uh-huh. It was America's first development, and it was called Hollywood Land, and that's why they were trying to do this idea where houses were all in uniform and stuff like that, but they had this huge sign on the hill that said Hollywood Land. So that's it. Yeah. So I never realized that about that movie. I never realized that at all.
Another line I would like to bring up is the start of the second verse. Guy says, "Complete control for Cassavetes," which it seems to me like a reference to the song "Complete Control" by The Clash. Do you know that song?
Not off the top of my head. I'm not a Clash guy. I appreciate them once again, but I don't listen to them. I'll
put a link to that in the show notes so people can check it out if you've never heard it. But so "Complete Control" is a song they wrote. I think it was on their first album, like the US version. I don't know if it was on the UK version, but basically it's a song about how just troubles with their record label. Like, they wrote this song called "Remote Control," and the label wanted to put that out as a single, and the band didn't want that to be out as a single. They didn't want themselves represented that way, but they had signed control over to the label. Under maybe false pretenses, right? Like, I'm sure they were assured, oh yeah, you'll have control over your art, you'll be able to do things the way you want to do them. But it's sort of a whole song about how that didn't turn out to be true, which I think is highly relevant to Fugazi's career and to what they're saying in this song. So that's an interesting parallel to me.
Yeah, definitely. Well, one line that I really love about this song, it's probably one of my favorite Fugazi lines. It's probably because morally I feel the same way about the film industry, is Hollywood, city of shame. Mm-hmm. I think that is just it, because it is, to me at least, from what I see here in Pennsylvania, which is where I'm from. It's not the same atmosphere as if I grew up in it, but I was, from the beginning, I was like, Hollywood, you poor city of shame. Wow, that's just great. And then I got into. I mean, I've been able to thank Guy for writing the song because it got me to learn a little bit more about John Cassavetes. But
Yeah, and
at the same time,
the word "poor" in that line too is great. It's highly ironic, of course, because Hollywood is a place where a huge amount of money gets made, but in some very important ways, it is a poor city. If we're talking in terms of, real creative art, it sometimes can be really disappointing in that way.
Well, yeah, from here on the East Coast, what I see is stuff like Access Hollywood or Inside Edition or all that stuff, or even on our nightly news, we'll have a clip where it talks about a movie actor or something like that. And if you want to see me get yelling at the TV, it's usually over something like that. So
I never come across that sort of thing on TV. I'm like a cord cutter. I just have the streaming services at this point. But of course you can't go to a grocery store without seeing tabloids in the checkout aisle talking like about ridiculous gossip about movie stars, which is like, who cares? Who is buying this shit?
Yeah, and everyone has an opinion too, and it's nobody ever sits back and says, well, there are people that do that. I can't say that. I try to. I really do.
I would say that
my sense of humor sometimes gets the best of me, and I start making fun of things that I really have no business talking about sometimes.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
I was gonna say, I think my favorite line of the song, if I had to pick one, is basically, if it's not for sale, you can't buy it. I think that's the line that comes to my mind every time I think of this song. And it's, on one hand, it's a line that is circular, and it sort of reminds me of the phrase, "it is what it is," which is a phrase that people criticize all the time. They're like, oh, that's meaningless. It's so stupid to say it is what it is, like, obviously. But I always disagreed with that. I think there's a lot of meaning in that phrase, "it is what it is." It tells you something important about a given situation, like, basically this can't be changed, is what it's really conveying. But I think that's sort of similar with the line, "if it's not for sale, you can't buy it." On one level, it seems like, yeah, okay, it's obvious. If it's not for sale, you can't buy it. But it's a line that causes you to meditate on what it means. Like, it seems like something that's invited by a circular statement like that, just asking you to think about it. And it's hard to realize until you do think about it for a while. It's something I've been thinking a lot about with Fugazi and their sort of DIY way of doing things and Discord and whatnot is, so there's this concept. I'm not a psychologist, but there's this concept of mental schema, which is basically the patterns in which your brain sees the world, and you sort of get locked into those patterns. If a certain set of things is all you see, then that's all that you think is possible. And when it comes to artists and big sort of deals with, be it record labels or movie studios or whatever, it seems like we just have like two basic patterns for things, which is, one, people who make a deal but they get screwed because they had a bad deal. They took the money and they lost control over their art or whatever. In some way they got screwed. Or B, people who make a really smart deal and they do well with their negotiations with the studio. But what we have almost no examples of, famous examples at least, is people like Cassavetes, bands like Fugazi, the artists who just say no to signing over control. They just opt not to do it, and they instead do it their own way with their own money, and they're like, okay, here's what I made with my money. If you would like to now buy the thing that I've made, you're welcome to do that, but we're going to do it on my terms. Like, I'll set my prices, I'll make the art I want to make, I'll release things the way I want to release them. And that's just not a psychological schema that we see a lot in our day-to-day lives. So that's one of the reasons I think Fugazi is important. It shows us that it can be done, and there are not enough people showing us that.
That's exactly what I was just going to say. I hear a lot of people say, well, Fugazi showed me how to live and make the right choices. And I say, well, I always knew how to live. They showed me that it could be done. Right. And that's so funny that you said that, because that was going right through my mind right before it came out of your mouth. So we're on the same page there. Definitely. I don't disagree with that.
Awesome. We haven't talked too much about the sound of the song yet and the music in it. Is there anything you'd like to say about that? You did mention the guitars in the beginning.
Well, this song is strange because Guy, when he comes in, he's like, "Shut up," and he's yelling that, and it's one of the more angry sounding songs. But once you get to know Fugazi and you understand the lyrics and you understand where it's coming from, there's no reason to be angry. He's just imitating Cassavetes, or not Cassavetes, but he's imitating Juzo. And I don't think "Shut Up" was part of that. I think this is my last picture, but I think it gives a great effect lyrically, and I think I like it when Guy is angry like that, when he sings like that. I think that's a really great feature. I did listen to the Steve Albini version of this, and the guitar is on Guy's guitar, which is the screaming one, the one that screams. It's way down low. The volume levels are way low, and it doesn't quite do it for me. So I understand what they were talking about volume levels and everything on those issues. But the chorus, the guitar that Ian plays, that chorus is typical Fugazi. It would explain it. And the funny thing to me was the third time I listened to your podcast, I think maybe it was the fourth. I had contacted you like minutes before I listened to that one, and I said I would like to do Cassavetes if we couldn't get Jem to do it. And what happened was I listened to it and I realized that Cassavetes was your song to start it off, and I'm like, oh boy. So, but this song screams Fugazi to me 100%. The Fugazi that I know and love, and it's dark. That verse is very dark. The guitar playing in the back is very dark. It's got that. It's like that double picking that Ian does that I can't find in most anything but Hendrix style. He does it in Target. He does it in the beginning of Styrofoam, and he does a little bit of pick scraping in this, which I think is amazing. I think it definitely is one of the things I love about this band is that style and that deep sound.
Yeah, I listened to the Albini demo too. I would say it's much sort of messier, bassier. It has like a heavier sound in the demo. It's definitely a little bit slower and more clunky. To me, it's interesting. I think to me, it's definitely not as good on the demo as the eventual record version would be. I don't feel that way about all the demos. I believe I said in our first episode, 23 Beats Off, I think I like the Albini demo better on that one.
Me too.
But yeah, for this one, for me, Killtaker version all the way. And it always makes me wonder, like, because I think Albini's a great engineer, and I'm like, well, yeah, like, I wonder about the bands that really shone with him. Like, what if the Pixies had recorded Surfer Rosa with Donzi and Tara instead? Like, would that have sucked? Would it have been better? It's very weird to think about.
That was just a demo. If you recall, that was just a demo. It wasn't the finished version of. So that never came. That never went into any kind of fruition or tangibility. It just they stopped right there on the way back. I think it was Pennsylvania that they heard it. They popped it in the car, and they both got to DC, and they were in separate cars, and they said, Yeah. Basically at the same time too.
But yeah, I agree with you. I love the guitar stuff here. It's another example of that classic Fugazi guitar style where Ian is doing some chugging kind of guitar stuff, and Guy is doing high notes and those wild slides on his guitar. That's really cool. Joe, for most of the song, I'd say Joe is just kind of holding it down, although the bass line right at the end gets so much cooler. He throws in these extra little notes. I love that.
Right.
Like that little part that he does at the end, that could be the foundation of an entire Fugazi song, but instead it's just sort of like a fancy little thing he does at the end of this, which is pretty cool. I was also going to mention, you talked about Guy screaming "shut up" in the beginning. The way his voice clips on that, like he yells it so loud that you can tell it's clipping the the recording desk or whatever. It's like sort of compressing his voice.
Yeah.
It sounds so cool, so hardcore. His vocal in general on this is just wild. Like, he's going nuts.
It's not annoying though. That's pretty cool.
No.
If you can clip without it being annoying, that's great.
Yeah. I especially love that vocal trill he does when he says Rollins. He's like, Rollins.
He does that in a couple like live songs too.
Yes,
I hear it quite a bit. Maybe that's his French and Italian upbringing. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite little Guy tricks. I also want to give a shout out to that drum intro. It's tremendous.
Oh, yeah.
I love the drums in the intro. And last time, I promise, I'm going to quote from the 33 1/3 book.
Good. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Which is this was crazy to me because Brendan said that Ted Nicely was really on top of that song. He basically wrote the drum intro because in the beginning, Brendan was just playing it as sort of it was just more normal. But Ted was like, no, here's what you got to do, and just did the exact thing. So that blew my mind. I'm now wondering how much of a role he played in some of their other songs that I think are just, classic, just Brendan parts or the band on the whole. Like, how many ideas like that did he have? The only other thing I think I really wanted to mention about Guy and the lyrics is the line "bust a genre." For so long, I had no idea what he was saying there. That's such a hard line to understand. I think genre is a French word. It's hard enough to just say in English, but to sing like that in a song like this, it's like, you're like, what is he saying? Is he saying position? So I thought that was funny. One more thing is that I was listening to some of Fugazi's classic concerts from the Fugazi Live series on Discord.com, which I always encourage our listeners to go buy some of those. But there's this famous couple of concerts in September of 1993 they did in New York City. So I was listening to that, and Guy introduces Cassavetes. He says, "This is a song about making your own road." So there you go, straight from the horse's mouth. Which, by the way, as I was reading the Wikipedia page for Cassavetes, and there was nothing on the whole page about Fugazi. So if you read that page now, I'm the guy who added the line on Cassavetes' Wikipedia page about the Fugazi song right under the Le Tigre entry. So you're welcome, folks.
Wow. Well, there you go. If you have learned and done anything.
I was like, it needed to be done.
They've always canceled my suggestions on Wikipedia, so I hope that gets on there.
You have to be good. You have to be good to make a Wikipedia edit that survives. So I hope mine does, because damn it, Fugazi deserves to be mentioned on that page. In my opinion.
Yeah, I think John Cassavetes got a lot of listeners, and let me also mention his son is Nick Cassavetes, who directed The Notebook, and I think did she get Jenna Rollins? Did she get an award for it or Best Picture?
I don't know, and I had never.
I wouldn't
previously
be surprised if she did, but I don't know either.
Yeah, I had never been interested in watching The Notebook, sort of until I realized that Nick Cassavetes directed it. So I don't know. Maybe now I'll give it a shot. Maybe I'll.
I think you probably should have a box of tissues with you, because it's a tearjerker. Okay. There's no doubt about it. I've seen the end part. I work in the healthcare industry a little bit, and I deal with Alzheimer's patients quite a bit. And this story is about Alzheimer's, and it's
sounds rough.
It is rough. It is, and it's actually a beautiful story. So I'm not a big love story fan, but I do have feelings, and this one that story got to me. So it's a beautiful thing to watch, actually.
Well, speaking of feelings, Jared, please join me in a segment called Ratings. Do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me? And tell me how you feel about Cassavetes on a scale of 1 to 5 stars. Can you rate this song in terms of the Fugazi catalog?
Ever since I heard you just start doing this, I've been thinking about the 5-star songs, and for me, songs like Smallpox Champion and Rend It get 5 stars. Cassavetes too. This is one of the albums. While it's not my favorite album, I don't really have favorite albums, but I relate to Steady Diet of Nothing the best, which is not many people have that feeling about it, but Cassavetes for me is definitely a 5-star. I've been playing with that for a while, and there's no doubt about it. It's 5 stars for me.
For me, I think this is a great song. I think it falls just short of my top tier Fugazi songs. I think I'm going to go 4.5. It still is really, really good, and I like it a lot. One of my favorite things about it is the sway of the chorus. Da, 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 da. It has such a great feel to it, and I do love it in that way. So yeah, this is one of the great ones for me. Big ratings, 5 and 4.5, huge.
Yeah.
All right, well,
it's got that feeling. Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt about it.
It's one that you'd really be excited about if they pulled that out at a live show and you get to like jump around to that chorus.
I could have sworn I had seen it live. I could have sworn I had, but every show I go back and look at, they didn't play it live. So for me, for the shows I went to, so I must have just watched it so many times on YouTube or whatever that I thought I saw it live.
Well, Jared, let's talk plugs. Where can listeners reach you? Do you have any projects or anything like that you want to plug? It's your time.
Sure thing. Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram, just under my name, Jared Coffin. My last name is like the box that you die in, Coffin. So that is my last name. It's not a punk pseudonym or anything. It's the way it is. I am a photographer. I work in EMS. I'm not an EMT or anything like that, but I do transports and stuff like that for discharges and stuff like that at hospitals. But I'm a photographer, and I'm working on a book, hopefully, in the next couple of years. I'm doing it really easy. It's about my county, Berks County, which is right in central Pennsylvania. And it's going to be like treasure spots of pictures that I think are great in the area, like trees or something like that might be developed in the future. But it's just going to have the GPS coordinates. It's not going to have anything about what I say about the picture. And it's just going to be like a big treasure map that you can drive around the county and get an idea. So I'm working on that. That's just my own personal thing. You can also join this would be great too. If you join This Is Not a Fugazi Appreciation Society. Just to show you how we work. That's not the original name of the group. We were just called the Fugazi Appreciation Society. And we had a member say to the group, why is this not called this? So we decided to change it. And like we can get in touch or get you in touch with the people that you want to get in touch with if you have questions about who to talk to and things like that. Maybe people at Discord or maybe like anybody in the Fugazi world. We might be able to steer you in the right direction. So we'd love to have you join. We're on Facebook. You just have to answer a couple questions because the whole spam thing, but it's not to judge you or anything like that. It's just to get you in the door. And other than that, I'm just really glad that this is an opportunity. I am really pleased that I could do a little mark and equate myself with Fugazi this way. I never planned on doing anything like this, and it's just been a really great opportunity. I have to thank the band. The band has done so much. Every time I've met all of them, and every time I've met them, they've given me the time. They weren't like next in line or anything. They always gave me the time that I asked for. So I thought that was really cool, all the way from Ian to Brendan to Joe. I remember when I saw Brendan with the Cassavetes in Harrisburg, he grabbed me right after the show, and he was drenched, and he gave me a huge hug. And I thought I was like, wow, that's not only is that funny, but that's really cool. So, I mean, I love these guys. I think they're really important. And I couldn't tell you where I'd be today without them. Maybe guiding me, and giving me some kind of soundtrack to my life. That's the way I look at it. But I think that pretty much covers everything. And I want to thank you. I think when I first heard your podcast, I'm like, wow, this guy is really good at podcasts. I would like to be a part of this.
Oh, so, that's really sweet of you to say. Thank you, man.
Well, I think you have a voice and you have a personality that's very comfortable. I got to tell you, I was a little bit nervous. I've never done anything like this before, but you made it very easy, and I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate you talking with me, so thank you, and good luck with that book. That's a really cool idea, and ever since I started this podcast, it's just made me so much more appreciative of other people's like just crazy little project ideas that they are passionate about. So thanks for doing that, and definitely let me know if that comes to fruition. And
I definitely will. In fact, I'll get you out a copy if it ever comes to fruition.
Oh, awesome. Well, yeah, I'll be seeing you around the your Facebook page, and listeners, as for me, you can always also look into the Facebook page for the Alphabetical Fugazi and tell us what you think about Cassavetes. And if you want to reach me on email, it's fugaziatoz@gmail.com. So please join me again for the next episode when we will be discussing caustic acrostic. Until then, keep your eyes open.
This is my last picture.